In 1992, a crack developer released a game for the ZX Spectrum for a war that was fully 8-bit. This man promptly escaped from the Catalan stockade to the Los Angeles underground. Still wanted by the retro community, he survives as a chief technology officer. If you want to wargame the Spanish Civil War, if you don't want to play with cardboard, and if you can find him, maybe you can be Caudillo.
Today we're looking at the Spanish Civil War, a war game by Richard Forsythe and Jason Davies. Let's jump into the historical background. Spain in the 1930s was a troubled land. In the 1920s, Alfonso XIII ruled via a front dictator, General Rivera. This had seen some economic success and colonial success in Morocco. Rivera's economic boom ended in 1929 with a poor harvest and then the Wall Street crash. Attempts to politicise the army cost him the support of the army itself, and then he went into exile in 1930. In 1931, elections led to a Republican majority in local councils, which was seen as a plebiscite on the monarchy. Alfonso XIII asked General Sanjurjo, the Lion of the Rift, if he could count on the support of the Civil Guard. The answer was, maybe not. King Alfonso XIII fled the country and the Second Republic was proclaimed peacefully. The Second Republic under Aznar tried to fix some of the issues facing Spain. There were too many officers in the army. 1/6 of the army were officers, so they pensioned off a lot of the officers. The church had a lot of influence and control. The Republic set forth to reduce the influence of the church and to close down the monasteries. There were also lots of agricultural labourers who didn't have any land. The government started a small-scale land purchase programme. All these things angered the right, but without weakening them. General Sanjurjo led a right-wing coup, possibly monarchist. This failed very quickly, and he fled to Lisbon. In 1933, right-wing parties, such as the CEDA, led by Gil Robles, who wanted to be elected as El Jefe of Spain, won the elections, and reversed a lot of these changes. Asturian miners rose in revolt, and were crushed by troops from Africa, the Spanish Legion, known as the Bridegrooms of Death, and Moroccan Regulares. In 1933, José Antonio Primo de Rivera, son of the dictator of the 1920s, founded the Falange Española, the Spanish Phalanx, a Spanish fascist political organisation. In the 1936 elections, Aznar managed to return to power in the Popular Front, the Falange was suppressed, and Rivera sent to prison on firearms charges. While not a socialist himself, Aznar supported the seizure of land by peasants and began to appoint socialists and communists into the Civil Guard and the elite Assault Guard. Plotting was already underway. General Sanjurjo, in exile, and General Mola, who had been sent to Pamplona to keep him out of the way, were plotting a Carlist uprising. Carlists were an ultra-conservative, reactionary, ultra-Catholic organisation named after Don Carlos, a claimant for the throne of Spain in the early 19th century. They had fought 4 separate wars in Spain in the 19th century and lost them all, and were always up for another fight. General Franco, the chief of staff of the army and youngest general, was sent to look after the Canary Islands, far out of the way. This is the map. This is Spain, 1936. Let's see who is doing what and where and to whom. In the northwest, you've got Asturias. The Asturian miners have risen up. They're ready to fight again, and they control the coast. The town of Jaen. They often use dynamite in their mining, and then use those to make their own grenades because the standard grenades weren't very good. The army is commanded by Colonel Antonio Aranda Mata, reputed to be a Freemason and a Republican. He got on well with local officials, and the Falange distrusted him. He declared his loyalty to the Republic on the 17th of July. 4,000 miners left for other parts of Asturias and Spain to fight. He then secretly called in Civil Guard and Assault Guard personnel, and then declared for the rebellion on the 19th of July. Moving east into Old Castile, we have the city of Burgos, where in July the National Defence Council formed. This was the government of the rebels. So we have an army unit here in Burgos. In the extreme northeast of Spain, we have the Basque country. The Basques were deeply conservative, deeply Catholic people, but also valued their traditional language and culture and the autonomy offered by the Republic, and therefore sided with the Republic, not the rebels. Inland, the city of Vitoria was easily captured by rebel nationalists led by Angel Ángel García Benítez in July 1936. Moving east into Navarre, we have Pamplona. In the Carlist Wars of the 19th century, the government held Pamplona against the Carlists. In 1936, however, the Carlists and General Mola raised their forces and seized the city. Moving east through Aragon, we arrive in Catalonia, home of Spain's second city, Barcelona, a very rich area, lots of industry, lots of trade, and the assault guards, the elite urban police, have taken control of Barcelona. In real life, a very revolutionary area. When Orwell visited in December 36, the Barbers was proclaiming, "Els barbers no son esclaus!" Barbers are not slaves. Also, anarcho-syndicalist militias and communist militias not affiliated with the Communist Party of Moscow, such as the Workers' Party of Marxist Unification. Catalonia historically had been independent of Castile as the independent Kingdom of Aragon and had its own empire in the Mediterranean and its own language, Catalan. Under the Republic, they had significant autonomy and wished to maintain this. Moving down the coast, we come to Valencia. In July, there was a series of strikes in Valencia by the trade unionists, and these managed to stop a possible coup. Further down the coast, we find the province of Murcia and the city of Cartagena, a major Spanish naval base. Here I have placed two Republican militia, one representing the railway workers, who were very important in the early days of the Civil War because they had their own communications network. Moving into New Castile, the military coup in Madrid failed. The government eventually armed the trade unionists, but some elements of the army were loyal to the Republic. Anarcho-syndicalist militias also formed. South of Madrid, in the Alcazar of Toledo, Colonel Moscardo managed to hold out until relieved. While under siege, the Republic threatened to execute his son unless he surrendered. He refused. His son was later executed as part of a reprisal against an air raid. After the relief of the siege, Moscardo was allowed to wear a black cloak to symbolise his mourning and was raised to be general. Moving west into Extremadura, the town of Badajoz is loyal to the Republic, been taken over by farm workers eager to own land. There's no troops there as yet. In the town of Cáceres, right-wing militia has formed, represented here by an aristocratic landowner. Moving south into Andalusia, the military coup succeeded in Seville, and rebels also managed to seize control of Cordoba and Granada. It didn't go all their own way though. In the towns of Lora del Río and Jaen, we have here anarcho-syndicalist militias. What of the Army of Africa? The Spanish Legion and the Moroccan Regulares are waiting, ready to cross. But how will they do it? Rebels had managed to persuade many navy officers to join the coup.
¿Dónde están mis chorizos?
The order to take part, though, was transmitted in the clear. A todo vapor hacia Marruecos. Recoge legiones irregulares. Derrocar a la República. Arriba España!
¡Casados! ¡Zócalo! ¡Zócalo! Yo soy el marinero! Soy capitán! Yo no soy marinero! Soy capitán! Soy capitán! Soy capitán!
It's just a Z80 snapshot, but somebody's very kindly done. And when you load it up into the Spectrum, you get this lovely screen. You can start the game. You've got four options. You can start the game, load up save game. You can toggle between hidden movement and no hidden movement. I'm going to select hidden movement, even though I'm playing against myself. There is a two-player option, but you can't change that. The Republican player gets to add additional units to the map. There is some choice here. The Republican player goes first. This is a disadvantage. You've got various units you can flip between. You've got militias, you've got the Civil Guard, you've got an army unit. So I'm first of all going to put a Republican militia unit up in Santander. This fills the gap between the Asturian miners on the left and the Basques on the right. Moving down into Aragon, near the coast of the town of Gandesa, if we don't garrison that with a unit, and we're going to choose a strong unit, a Spanish armour unit, the nationalists will drive towards the sea and cut off Catalonia. This is a bad thing. Now move to the south coast. The nationalists are going to want to get hold of ports on the south coast. So we're going to put some civil guards into Almeria, also into Malaga, town of Huelva on the southwest, just keeps things tidy, and there's Badajoz. We also get to place the Spanish Air Force somewhere. It's rather small, but it is loyal to the Republic. We're going to put the Spanish Air Force into Madrid. As soon as you finish placing the Air Force, we move on to the Nationalist setup. They get to go second, and you see here they have a lot more units. They've got civil guards, they've got army units, they've got right-wing militias, and they've also got the Falange, the Spanish phalanx. So I'm going to place units all over the place. The civil guards in Aragon, because I want to try and drive towards the sea. And to support them, let's have some of the Falange. Let's try and keep the north of Aragon safe. So we're now going to block off Catalan with some more Falange. They're not great fighters, but they can hold the line. We'll now deploy our right-wing militia in Leon, a couple of militias in Galicia, and then 2 more militias south of the Douro. Now move to the south. We want to make sure we've got the army in there to keep us strong. Strong in the south. Another army unit, let's place that up in Leon. We want to try and join up the north and the south. Turn 1 starts with a devastating blow from the Soviet Union. Over to Moscow.
Ispansky omelette is gluten is menu.
The Republic will not get the strongest unit in the game, nor decent air support, nor decent infantry. The first phase is the supply phase, where the game adds up all the cities you control that are loyal to you and gives you supply points. Supply points are the currency of the game. You use them for activating units for movement, for attacking, and for building new units. This means you have to make many decisions during a turn where best to spend your supply points. The Nationalist player starts by trying to get control of the south. He marches his army unit out of Jerez, marches north, crosses the river to menace Lora del Río. Let's see how movement works. Units move from square to square. Normally a movement from square to square costs 1 movement point. Here a nice Republican militia is wandering around Spain. He's used 3 movement points already, but let's carry on. Square to square. He's not quite using hexagons, but the offset squares act like hexagons. Now let's add a river. Rivers add movement points. So he's used 1 point already, now it's 2. Let's cross the river. And no, he can't. Stop! Police! That will require 2 more movement points, which is 4. Mountains add 1 to movement. So going into the mountains costs 2. Crossing the river, then costs an additional point, so that's 2. If he wants to go backwards, crossing the river into mountains, that would cost 3. Zone of control. What about enemies? Moving next to an enemy costs an additional 2 movement points. So here, moving around the enemy will be very difficult. Crossing a river, moving around is going to take him many, many turns just to wander around the enemy. If a move is too expensive, you won't make it. The game will stop you. However, if it's the first move of the turn, you get to make it anyway, but your movement points will be reduced to 0. The first turn has a lot of opportunities for the Nationalists. The Republicans are mostly in their cities, so they can rapidly move around the countryside. In the actual Spanish Civil War, this was known as the column phase of the war, where rapid columns would dash around Spain, grabbing hold of territory. The more movement you do, the less points you have available for combat. The more combat you do, the less points you have available for building reinforcements. It's a balancing act. By moving units next to Republican units, you can effectively lock them in place. They can still move, but only 1 space. This stops them breaking out. The Nationalist player is locking into place the Catalans in Catalonia, the Basques of the Basque Country, the Asturian miners, and trying to build a cordon around Madrid. This does leave him with only 7 points available for attack. Ground units can only attack adjacent enemy units. The cost to attack is the attack strength, marked here on the left. Multiple ground units can attack the same target. After selecting the target, you move to this screen, which shows you all units involved in the attack and the defending unit. The game adds up the attack strength of all attacking units and compares that to the defence strength, the middle number. We then end up with a ratio. A dice is thrown and the result is read off. The result was an exchange, a middling result. The defender is eliminated, but one of the attacking units is eliminated as well. It's the attacker's choice which one that is. Any surviving attackers may advance after combat. The Nationalists occupy Lora del Río. After the combat phase comes the reinforcement phase. 1 unit from Africa gets to move by air to any controlled city. These units are the elite of the Nationalist army. Air transport was provided by the Germans. Planes could only transport 36 men at a time and had their seats ripped out. Aviation was not entirely reliable. General Sanjuro, the Lion of the Rif, flew back in a small plane from Portugal to become the Caudillo of Spain, insisted on bringing all his uniforms with him. The plane was overloaded and crashed on takeoff. Troops from Africa can only land in southern cities. This is a line from Toledo south. Finally, the Republican player gets a go. Calculate supplies. Uh-oh, we've got problems. As long as you can trace a line from the capital to your unit, that unit is in supply. Enemy units block supply, as do their zones of control. The nationalist capital is Burgos. It's possible to trace a line from Burgos to any nationalist unit. However, the nationalists have a trick up their sleeve. To the west of Spain is Portugal. Portugal was neutral. However, Salazar, leader of the Portuguese new state, was very friendly to Franco. So much so that Lisbon was considered to be the port of Castile. So as long as you can trace a line of supply to either Burgos or Lisbon, the nationalists are A-OK. Nationalist units block off our forces in Catalonia from Madrid. We have to unsupply one unit. Add up the number of victory points from your cities, divided by 2, that's the number of units you have. 10 divided by 2 is 5, we got 6 units. We have to unsupply one. Hang on though, what about the Basques? They're also cut off, but don't have a problem. The Basque and the Asturians have special rules. Units that are out of supply are marked with an X. Ground units out of supply cannot move, but may attack. Air units may move, but cannot attack. Both are at risk of being removed from the game. The Republican player is on the back foot. Best thing to do is try and stabilise the front lines and to hold off the attackers as best you can. Not a lot we can do in Catalonia for now, but the Basque have an opportunity to advance and try and surround the rebel there. The Asturians have a chance to try and attack Oviedo. In Catalonia, pushing forward to stop the fascists advancing any further. The elite assault guards from Barcelona are going to push up the Ebro Valley. In the south, we move the assault guards into the mountains above Almeria. That makes them harder to attack. We can't move the guards out of Malaga, though, because they were already out of supply. We can move the Republican militia, though, west from Murcia into Andalusia, just to try and protect them. And we're going to surround Moscado in Toledo. The Republicans have saved 22 supply points through attack. First order of business, let's push up the Ebro Valley. Spearheading the advance will be the Catalan assault guards.
El crim es una malaltia. Coneix la cura.
In support, the Spanish Sixth Army, which is loyal, and some Catalan militia. When attacking, you can spend 3 supply points for a bonus. This is a bonus to the dice roll, not to the odds. They weren't able to get the extra strength point to get 3-1 odds, but an exchange on 2-1, that's okay. When giving an exchange, you always want to eliminate the weakest unit you can, so the Catalan militia are sacrificed. And the army is going to advance next to the river. It's time for the big advance, the Asturian miners. There's 3 of them versus 1 fascist in Oviedo. I like those odds. The odds aren't that good. 3 miners only have an attack strength of 6. The army in defence has a defence of 5. That's 1-1. That's an attacker -1 result. Actually a middling result for the Asturians. It could have been a lot worse. Unfortunately, when they choose which unit to eliminate, they choose the one in Gijon. Asturian special supply rules state that as long as they control Gijon, Asturian miners in Asturias are never out of supply. Oh dear. The Republic only has 2 points left. That's enough for 1 attack by a militia unit, but not enough to build anything, so they can't replace any of their losses. At the end of the turn, we see victory points. Each side gains victory points by capturing the other side's cities. The Nationalists have 4, Republic nil. Once you reach a difference of 20, it's game over. September-October leads to the junta putting Franco in charge of Generalissimo.
Estoy acá ahora.
General Moda was commanding twice as many men, but General Franco had the elite troops and had managed to rescue Moscado in Toledo. This turned the nationalists' focus on Huesca, Badajoz, and a bit of action up in the Asturias. They can't drive in Madrid yet, they haven't got the troops. Troops from Valencia advance and try and move around the back of the rebels in Aragon. Republican losses in Catalonia have ironically relieved their supply situation. They advance and capture the town of Jaen in the Pyrenees. The Republicans are strong in the Basque country, so let's take advantage of that strength and try and drive the fascists out. By pushing south, we can cut them in two and help the Catalonians get control of Aragon. Not quite enough strength of 3-1, so we're on 2-1 odds. In exchange, middling result, we lose one of our Basque militia. However, they can be replaced. We are very close to our areas of supply. The Ebro offensive continues apace. With an excellent result on the 2-1 table, Defender eliminated, the fascists are destroyed, and the Catalan assault guards advance. Time to take care of Moscado in Toledo. 3 Republican militias and the army in Madrid mean that there are odds of 3-1. A middling result, Defender is forced to retreat. However, you cannot retreat into an enemy zone of control. Therefore, Moscado is eliminated and Toledo is free. No pasaran. The last third of 1936 sees the nationalists triumphant in southwestern Spain in Estremadura, but rather surrounded in Granada. They then decide they need to focus on capturing a port, because the Italians are on their way. They're too far away to get to Malaga, but the 2 Moroccans make an attack on the civil guard in the mountains above Almeria, even though one of them is out of supply. 2 things to note. The Defender, being in mountains, has a 50% bonus. Also, the Defender is asked if they want to increase their chances by spending supply points. This comes before the attacker, so if the attacker has enough supply points, he can cancel out the Defender's spending. An exchange is actually a pretty good result for the nationalists, although they have to sacrifice one of their elite units, the Moroccan Regulares. In the north, they decide to crush the final Asturian miners. The last of the Moroccan units gets flown into Granada, and now we have some Italians who want to join in. I can't put them in Cordoba. The city is not on the southeast coast. It's got to be a port city. Algeciras doesn't count because that's beyond the Straits of Gibraltar. We can't use Almeria because we don't control it. So for now, the Italians are going to have to wait. The Condor Legion have arrived and have put their towels next to the pool. It's a powerful air unit keen to experiment with air warfare, and they're getting put into Burgos. The nationalists then replenish their ranks with some militia. In November 1936, the imprisoned José Antonio Primo de Rivera is executed by a firing squad. Republican priorities are to try and form front lines, try and stop the nationalists moving too much, and to try and strangle the nationalists in the south. But also to stop the nationalists pushing south from Aragon. 3 attacks by the Republic this month. West of Madrid, using the Spanish Air Force. An attack on Vitoria in the Basque Country. And an attack on Huesca. All are victories. All are costly. The Republic have lost another 3 units and have yet to replace any. They can only afford to raise 1 Republican militia in Talavera. 1936 has seen rapid manoeuvring, but little in the way of territorial change. The Asturians have been crushed by the nationalists, but the Catalans have advanced in Aragon and the Basque have advanced in the Basque Country. It's all still very open.
En España, hay un flamenco cada 11 segundos. Un fandango cada 65 segundos. Una zarabanda cada 25 segundos. Una fiesta cada 24 minutos. Y 250 boleros diario.
1937 starts with a random event, and Mussolini is super keen. He's not even landed any troops yet, but already he wants to increase his involvement. This makes acquiring a port a priority, because he's going to send little tanquette and aeroplanes to help. In the actual Civil War, the Italians sent an air force which occupied Palma de Mallorca, where they often did bombing raids on Barcelona. With this in mind, the Nationalists moved civil guard and right-wing militia to menace Malaga. Over in Aragon, the Nationalists have built new fascist militias, distinct from the Falange. I'm not entirely sure what they are in game, but they are more effective. Perhaps they're meant to represent the super party Franco formed from the Spanish Phalanx and the Carlist, which are called the Fet y de Jons, Falange Española Tradicionalista y de Juntas de la Ofensiva Nacional Sindicalista. It was the only party allowed in nationalist Spain. They combine the jaunty red beret of the Carlists with the blue shirt of the Phalangists. In the south, Moroccan regulares take advantage of the ungarrisoned Almeria, capture it, and then hook round to the north. We've now captured a port, but that's in a tricky situation supply-wise, so I think it's time to drive the Reds out of Malaga. A civil guard and a right-wing militia versus a civil guard in mountains. That's 5 to 7.5. That's 1 to 2 odds. Those are terrible odds. The Nationalists are offered a chance of spending more resources. They're going to need every help they can get.
Libertad!
And a catastrophe for the Nationalists, a glorious victory for the Civil Guard and for the Republic. Note that the Civil Guard in Malaga was already out of supply. Perhaps waiting them out would have been a wiser choice. In the north, the army and right-wing militias close in on Santander. This time they've got a secret weapon, the German Condor Legion, armed with a brand new Stuka dive bomber. Legion pushed up to 2 to 1. They still only manage an exchange though, so they swap out the two militias. However, the army now takes Santander, and that's the whole of the north coast apart from the Basques in nationalist hands. Reinforcement phase sees the arrival of Italian armour. It's only very small though. Look at the attack value, it's 1. They are rather fast. Are they going to be landing at any available port? We're going to land them in Almeria. They also come with a small Italian air force. Finally, a right-wing militia forms in Seville, going to menace Malaga in the future. The Republic doesn't do a lot of movement, but does manage to capture the town of Belchite in Aragon, but focuses its efforts on a big attack west of Madrid. Let's see how that gets on. An overwhelming effort from the Republic. They still only manage an exchange though. Most of their supply points are spent on building militias, 6 militias scattered around their territory. Note that the International Brigade has arrived in Albacete. A group of supporters from around the world come to fight fascism. March 37 starts with supply problems for the nationalists. The Moroccans and the Carlists are out of supply in Andalusia. They're cut off from both Burgos and Lisbon. Something interesting here, Malaga is empty, so there could be a space through there, but Malaga is not controlled. Perhaps that also blocks supply. The nationalists take swift action to relieve their forces. They move the army and right-wing militia east to attack Jaen. In the north, the army marches in and occupies Bilbao. The attack on Jaen could involve the Civil Guard, but I didn't realise that they could attack even though they're out of supply. And even without the Civil Guard, the anarchists are eliminated. Jaen is captured and the Moroccans are relieved. The nationalists are caught in a Republican sandwich in Aragon, so decide to try and recapture Belchite. This is a success. The Civil Guard march in. They can't land Italian infantry in Malaga because although it's empty, they don't actually control it. They build an army in Pamplona and a right-wing militia to stop the Republic capturing Avila, famous for its tower. The most pressing issue for the Republic is the nationalist incursion in Castile, east of Madrid. They rush the International Brigade up there to stop them and launch a massive attack. And that was a crushing victory for the Republic. Another 2 victories for the Republic. In northern Aragon and north of Valencia, the nationalists ordered the Italian tankettes to advance, mainly to make space for their compatriots to land, and right-wing militia march into the undefended Malaga. In the north, it's time for the big offensive. The army and the Carlists, with the aid of the Condor Legion, attack Guernica. The bombing of Guernica caused international condemnation, so much so that the nationalists claimed they didn't do it, that the Condor Legion did it themselves, or that it was an inside job done by the Republicans. A large nationalist offensive south from the Sierra de Guadarrama leads to victory and takes them one step closer to Madrid. In Andalusia, the Moroccans, with the aid of Italian tankettes and Italian planes, destroy Republican militia. The Republican blockade is removed. In western Andalusia, the nationalists do another attack, forcing a Republican militia to retreat. They can't and are eliminated. And more Italians hit the beach at Almeria. Helps arrived in the form of another international brigade. The Republic send them south to try and stop the advance in Andalusia. The Republic send a unit west into Aragon. This is a mistake that will cost them later. They then launch a risky low-odds attack against Belchite. They force the nationalists to retreat, but they're able to do so and are not eliminated. Attacks in northern and southern Aragon, although at better odds, both fail badly with heavy casualties. The Republic is reduced to raising a militia unit in San Sebastian, the last stronghold of the Basques. In June, the nationalists keep up the pressure in the Basque country, forcing a retreat which is turned into an elimination. An attack west of Madrid goes badly, but they're able to advance out of their bridgehead in Almeria. In the real civil war, June 37 sees the death of General Mola in an air crash, flying back to Vitoria from north of Madrid. Meanwhile, the Republic don't attack, but concentrate on replacing their losses with militia all around Spain. July sees the Condor Legion bombing the Basques out of Vitoria, an Italian offensive along the coast which succeeds with casualties, and a massive attack in Andalusia which spends most of the nationalist supply points. The Republic's response is to rush forward the newly created militias to desperately try and hold the line. A major offensive west of Madrid involving the army and civil guards against militia only succeed in driving the militia back. This was fundamentally a waste of resources. August sees the Condor Legion move south to Segovia, ready to assist attacking Madrid, and the final assault on San Sebastian, the nationalists take some casualties, but the Carlists occupy the final Republican stronghold on the north coast. The Republic are in trouble. The nationalists are advancing on all fronts. They need to hold the line. They haven't got enough troops, they haven't got enough quality troops, and Castile south of Madrid is wide open. They perform an attack west of Madrid, not the best choice, even though it does eliminate a nationalist militia. As expected, the nationalists push over the mountains into Castile, but they can't take full advantage of this because their fastest unit, the Italian tankettes, is stuck in Andalusia. It's time for the Italians to do a big attack, 3-1 odds, including their air force, on a militia on the road to Cartagena. And they pushed them back. Another big offensive 2 Moroccan units and the Italian armour versus the International Brigade. The brigade is forced to retreat, but there's nowhere to run to, and they are eliminated. The Moroccans advance, leaving the Italian tankettes free for a big offensive next turn. The Republic tries to push west towards the borders of Extremadura. The attack goes badly wrong and they lose a unit. Rather than make a hole in their lines, they choose to sacrifice the Air Force. Things go better in the Ebro Valley, where a large offensive pushes the fascists back, but without eliminating them. A Republican and Catalan militia-led offensive manages to capture Teruel, although the defenders manage to retreat. The Italian tankettes cross the mountains and occupy Ciudad Real. They don't have enough movement points to capture Madrid, but this gets them very, very close. At the western end of the Sierra, an assault against the Republicans succeeds. They lose a militia, but they move their army closer to Madrid. A push east from Pamplona is very successful and the Republicans are eliminated. Along the seashore, the Italians attack Asturian miners. They lose an Italian infantry but capture Cartagena. As winter 1937 starts, the Republic don't have many spare men, and in no place is an attack a good idea. They spend their resource points on building troops where they can to try and stop the flood. The start of 1937 sees the nationalists gain full control of the south, and then slowly throughout the year they conquer the Basque country. The successes in Catalonia and Aragon don't take away from the fact that Madrid is threatened from the north, from the south and from the west. Only a miracle can save the Republic now.
Yo soy el Caudillo.
1938 starts with the best possible event for the Republic, France's partial mobilisation. Over to the Hôtel de Ville.
Je m'appelle Charles de Gaulle, et je sauverai la République espagnole. Vive la République! Vive la France! Vive la liberté! Vive l'égalité! Vive la fraternité!
Note the line of Republican units along the Pyrenees and that France itself is no longer neutral. The nationalists aren't that bothered though and move their attention to the south. The Italians push up the coast and relocate their air force to Cartagena. In the Ebro Valley, the nationalists are panicked into an attack on the Catalan assault guards. That did not go well. But an overwhelming assault by Italians and Moroccans on Asturian miners on holiday in Andalusia goes very well, as does another massive attack to the west of Madrid, keeping up the pressure. The nationalists aren't very concerned about the French, are they? All they do is raise a militia unit in Vitoria. The Republic start with de Gaullist armour at the west end of the Pyrenees, the second strongest unit in the entire game. They decide to liberate the Basque cities, San Sebastian, Irun, Guernica and Bilbao, before crossing the river and heading towards Santander. The French are in a good position to invade Catalonia, but the front is over in Navarre, so they're too far east. So some of them are going to cross the Pyrenees, and some of them are going to try and push west to get around the flank of the nationalists. In central Spain, they rush militia to the front like the little Dutch boy and his thumb. The French get started by attacking the nationalists in the Pyrenees.
Allons, entrons de la patrie, le jour de gloire est arrivé. Sacre bleu, je suis blessé.
Oh dear. At least French troops can be replaced, but only in France. And they also create 2 Basque militias to defend the newly liberated Basque cities. It's going to take the French a long time to get anywhere, so the nationalists carry on what they were doing before. Keep up the pressure on Madrid, advance in the south. However, as a precaution, they start building units in the north, fascist militias in Burgos, Leon, Oviedo, and some civil guards in Pamplona. The new French infantry and the newly raised Basque militias push south to menace Vitoria. Meanwhile, de Gaulle charges along the northern Spanish coast, liberating Santander and Gijon. The Basques don't waste any time in trying to push out the fascists. And they force a retreat. Meanwhile, to the east, a major offensive takes place. Catalan assault guards, militia, and the French army versus the Spanish army, and the Spanish army are eliminated. The Republic can build 2 militia units. Talavera is threatened. Building a unit there makes sense. Madrid is safe for the moment. Perhaps they should have built a unit in Santander to support de Gaulle. Fascists from Leon march north over the mountains to contain de Gaulle. From Burgos, the militia have a chance to reoccupy Santander, but instead they move to hold the line of the river. West of Madrid, the Condor Legion aids the Spanish army in attacking the assault guards. The assault guard go down fighting, and the militia advance. They are now 2 spaces away from Madrid. In the south, the Moroccans are unstoppable and push into Murcia. Along the coast, the Italians force a retreat and carry on their slow advance toward Valencia. In Aragon, the Carlist spearhead an attack which succeeds with some militia casualties. French troops push south and cross the Ebro, and then take part in a massive assault on Pamplona that goes badly wrong, and the militia takes the casualties. However, an attack in the Ebro Valley succeeds, leaving Pamplona the only nationalist stronghold in the north. In the build phase, the Republic builds militia in the Basque Country, leaving Santander empty yet again. De Gaulle has left all the load in Gijon. The fascists from Oviedo move to the coast. This leaves Oviedo free to build troops later. In Castile, the nationalists do a massive attack on the international brigade in Toledo. And they're forced to retreat but cannot. Moscado is avenged. It's all going well for the nationalists. Even a very risky 1-to-1 odds attack with 3 militia versus the army is a glorious victory for them. And in the south, the Moroccans and the Italians keep bullying militia. The Spanish 7th Army is built in Oviedo. De Gaulle had better watch out. The Basque militias move west and cross the river. The French move south into Aragon to threaten the rear of the nationalists and then launch a massive attack on Pamplona once more. A lot better, lads. And an attack by the army, the French army and militia drive the nationalists out of the last city they control in Aragon, Saragossa. And a remarkable turnaround of the victory points, both sides are now neck and neck. The army in Burgos moves north to threaten Santander. They could have taken it by moving west, then northwest into the mountains, then northeast. A blunder. In Murcia, there's a gap in the line, and the Italians take advantage of it, pushing forward into the Levante. In Asturias, is 2 fascists in the Spanish army versus the French invader. It's a risky attack because de Gaulle is the 2nd strongest unit in the game.
Chanson pour la victoire! Nous avons les balles de fer!
They've taken casualties, but de Gaulle's armour has been eliminated. The army and militia attack the Basques, who are going to the relief of Santander, and they wipe them out. Santander is still unoccupied though, and the Republic could build a unit there on their turn. Northwest of Madrid, the Condor Legion aid the nationalists in attacking. They succeed with casualties, but the nationalists always seem to have more men to replace their losses. On the southeast coast, the Italian Air Force takes off from Cartagena, not in a mission of mercy, but one of terror. The Italian infantry defeat the militia, there's nowhere for them to run, and now there's no one between them and Valencia. The Republic now have a plethora of quality troops in Aragon doing nothing, so they push them west to aid the Basques, push them south over the Ebro. An offensive in Aragon clears out the last of the fascists. They finally build a unit in Santander, and then some militia in Valencia and Gandia protect this important port city. The nationalists start with a big attack on Talavera, which is 1 space to the west of Madrid. Talavera is famous for its tile work.
Libertad! Igualdad! Fraternidad!
The Asturian miners are swapped for a militia, and the nationalists take Talavera. In the south, the Moroccans launch an attack on Albacete, in real life the headquarters of the International Brigade. They force a retreat, but forget to actually occupy Albacete. The Republic rushes troops west from the coast to protect Valencia, and remember to reinforce the empty Albacete. A Franco-Basque Catalan offensive towards Burgos is successful. The French are now 2 spaces away from the nationalist capital. The main Republican offensive is won against the Italians. Oh dear. If only they'd included the Republicans in the attack, maybe it would have succeeded. The next target for the nationalists is the city of Brunete, northwest of Madrid. And a much needed victory for the Republic there. Things don't go quite so well for the Republic south of Madrid, where Italian tankettes force a retreat. The nationalists now control 3 of the 6 squares surrounding Madrid. The Italians launch a massive attack on Alicante, and occupy Alicante. The Moroccans spearhead an attack on Albacete, and this time they remember to occupy the airport. The nationalists have a stranglehold around Madrid, which means the Republic has supply problems. They have to mark 9 units as out of supply. French troops march west, occupy Soria, then do an attack to the south of Burgos, which is gloriously successful, and they're now just 1 space away. Even though they're out of supply, the Asturian miners can still join in an attack with the French and the army against nationalist troops. They die in the process, but French troops are now 3 spaces away from Madrid. On the borders of Castile and Murcia, the International Brigade and the army attack right-wing militia, but the Italian fascist air force is come to defend them. Is it going to be forever? No, they've gone down in flames. The Italian air force have been eliminated. The Spanish army marched into Santander before facing their opponents across the river. A militia moved to reinforce the Burgos front. More importantly, after 18 months of war, it's time for a big attack on Madrid. 2 army units, a militia, and the Condor Legion. And that's a crushing victory. They cross the Casa del Campo and occupy Madrid. Things don't go all their way though. An attempt to stop the French from attacking Burgos fails badly and they lose a unit. The Italians continue their advance along the coast, still threatening Valencia, but there aren't many of them left and there aren't many places they can get reinforcements from. The Moroccans, of course, are unstoppable. The loss of Madrid leads to massive supply problems for the Republic. They even force the sacrifice of a French unit. There are no supplies coming from France. Send French troops south and also try and surround the Italians on the coast. Top Republican priority has to be the liberation of Madrid. Civil guards, anarchist militias and the International Brigade all team up. And they've driven the army out with some casualties. On the coast, Catalan assault guards, the French and Republican militias team up to defeat the Italians. There's only one of them left. They're not looking so cocky now. And in the north, the city of Logrono falls to the Republic. There are now 2 French army units threatening Burgos. It's the end of 1938. Winter sees the French push along the north coast. But in the centre, as the year progresses, the nationalists get closer and closer to Madrid. In the south, the nationalists advance up the east coast, but towards the end there is a burst of Republican activity and they drive south, and nationalists are removed from Republican rear areas. No random events this time. The nationalists march the Carlists into Toledo and then move troops to block the Republic in the south and also in the north. Their main focus is obviously going to be recapturing Madrid. The Republic have been crushed, and the Carlists march in. And then they build an army in Avila, and then troops in the south and the north to hold the line. The Republic are running short of troops and running short of options. They move troops to the coast, recapturing Alicante, and blockade the Italians. In the centre, what little troops they have are reorganised to try to liberate Madrid. The Civil Guard from Brunete, anarchist militia and Republican militia. Can they save the city? They've only gone and done it, at cost, but Madrid is free. An attack at better odds by 2 French soldiers versus fascists goes badly wrong. That's not the worst of it. They now don't have enough supply points for the French troops to attack Burgos. This could be a catastrophe. They have enough points to build 1 militia unit. Brunete, Alcala and Guadalajara are all threatened. Guadalajara's worth 2 victory points, so they protect that city. The Spanish army occupy Brunete. The tankettes move forward to threaten Guadalajara. It's the Phalangists who take Alcala. The Spanish army march north, cross the Douro and reoccupy Soria. On the coast, note the Italians trapped there have expired because of lack of supply. Naturally they're going to attack Madrid. The Phalangists from Alcala, the Spanish army in Talavera, the army in Brunete, a right-wing militia and the Condor Legion all attack the Spanish capital. The army and right-wing militia team up to take on the French invaders, and they're defeated. There's just 1 French unit left next to Burgos. It's a measure of how little troops the Republic has that the loss of Madrid does not cause supply problems. They move what troops they do have west, don't make any attacks, and just build troops where they can, including building 3 Basque militias in the Basque country. The Republic is hanging on by a thread. In May, the Nationalists move troops forward. French troops in Logroño are defeated with casualties, but that's another city they control. They launch an offensive over the Ebro, defeating the Basques. There's no penalty for attacking over a river because one of the units is on the same side as the defender. And then they launch an overwhelming assault at a Republican militia to the north of Madrid. They're taking no chances. The Republic are on the ropes. Troops have moved forward, no attacks are made, and they have to make hard choices about where to build. A unit in the Basque country makes sense. There are only a few French soldiers left. Eventually they do build one in the Pyrenees. It's a long way from anywhere. They're desperately holding on. It's June. The Nationalists have troops to spare, apart from in the far south, where things are a little bit trickier. They move forward, and then the army coordinates an assault on Bilbao. They force the Basques to retreat and capture the city. They raise the Falange militia in Granada, and they even have time to fly over some elite Moroccan troops into Burgos. The Republic has troops, but not the supplies for them, and have to mark 3 as unsupplied. At this point they've lost the game, unless they can recapture some cities. Basque militia launch an attack on Bilbao. Can they recapture the city? They cannot, and the Nationalists now occupy Guernica. The Republic goes down fighting. There are some victories in the far south, but they don't make any difference. At the end of the turn, the Nationalists have 22 victory point difference, and that's the end of the game. We have returned to the main menu. Heavy fighting around Madrid, further nationalist advances in the north, and the collapse of the French invasion. That was the Spanish Civil War. In a moment we're going to Madrid. After that we'll see if we can make it better.
España!
¡Hurra!
España!
¡Guarde!
España!
¡Libre!
In order to snorkerify, first we must understand. We've got a Z80 snapshot, and that's not a lot of use to us. We need to break into it and see what it's made of. How do we do this?
Science!
Using Spectaculator, you can open up the debugger. At the top there is a helpful little button which sets the next instruction. If we set the next instruction to 65535, the very top of RAM, for Caudillo, doing this gives us the basic prompt. This tells us straight away that Caudillo is not using the ZX Spectrum print routine because the font on the screen and the font of the message are not the same. Then look at the listing. Oh, the screen's all white. No problem, we can change the ink to black. And here we are, line 0. We can see a few things here. It's doing a clear, so we know the address it starts at, 24500. We see there's a loading screen, and we see the execution point of the program. Finally, we can see that he does not use user-defined graphics. UDGs here are just a load of old tosh and nothing at all like we see in the game, which are really quite lovely. So we've got to the basic prompt. We just save the code. Saving the code is done simply by adding a file name and then the keyword code. We know where the code starts, 24500, but we also need to specify a length. How long is the code for Caudillo? Haven't got a clue, so we're going to calculate the length as 65535, the top of RAM, and we're subtracting from that 24499 to give us the proper length. Let's make sure it works. Enter the new command, type clear 24499, load the machine code, and then execute the address 44348, and we're back to the main menu. What to do about a loading screen? We have no idea what it was, so the canvas is blank. At a very basic level, we could produce this, the title of the game, and who wrote it. This is rather dull. I could use the advert for the game. The original form is a bit muddy, so it doesn't come across very well. And even cleaned up in GIMP, it still looks a bit shonky. There are some famous images to do with the Spanish Civil War. One is Robert Capa's image of the falling soldier. This is under copyright, we can't use that. We could, however, try to recreate it using chroma key, myself posing, and ZX Paintbrush, but this is mimicking a dead man, rather poor taste. I could use an image of Francisco Franco, dubious copyright, recreate it myself, poor taste. Why not use the two flags of the opposing sides? The nationalists used red, yellow, red, and the Republic had red, yellow, purple. And have these alternating with the flash attribute, and have the information about the game in the middle, avoiding the complication of the Spanish coat of arms with the shield and the pillars. I was quite pleased with this, until I then realised that the proportions of the three stripes were not the same. The Republic has 3 equal stripes, the Nationalists have a narrow stripe of a quarter at the top, a broad stripe of a half in the middle, and a narrow stripe at the bottom. So I've done this instead, wrote a little program, and this is very nearly the final result. After I played the game on Twitch, I decided it needed the manual recreating, so I spent a lot of time building up a manual based on what I understood the rules to be based on experiment. One of the things that struck me from researching the Spanish Civil War was all the different flags that were used by the different factions, but you don't see them in the game. Would it be nice if they were in the game? But how to do this? I've no idea how the game is structured. It's all in assembly. Moscado. He is a unique unit. If you open up the debugger, you can search for text strings. Moscado is easily found, he's there, and there are 2 bytes before him which are interesting, 5 and 3. If you change the 3, that turns out to be his movement points. But what's the 5? Well, his attack value is 1, defense is 2, but that doesn't add up to 5, does it? That doesn't make any sense. So what if you start changing it? If you set it to 0, Moscado becomes militia, 233. Set it to 1, it becomes better militia, 243. There are units that aren't even used. There's a superpowered air unit. Some of the values don't have unit icons, but still have actual strengths. All the way up to 15. Once you get to 16, he changes sides. And from then on, if you keep adding 16, he cycles through the different factions in the game. Beyond the British, all the faction flags are black. It looks like we have 8 spare factions. So the funny byte beforehand, 5, is his faction, 0, nationalist, and his unit type, 5, Moscado. We now know the mechanism by which each unit is attached to a faction, but where's the graphic for each faction? Looking at the nationalist flag, we've got a stripe, a big stripe and a little stripe. If it was a UDG, that would be 2 solid lines, 4 blank lines and 2 solid lines, or possibly the reverse. Opening up the debugger again, we can search for a series of bytes. 255, 255, solid line, 0000, 255, 255. That stream of bytes, an odd byte, and then a duplicate. What happens if you change the first series of bytes to 2550 and repeat? Oh look, something that looks a bit like the Catalan flag. But it's only the first half of the flag. If we skip the next character and do the same thing again, but on the mysterious byte, we see it's the attribute. We've found the flags. I wrote a small program to show the new faction flags I'm going to add to the game. The first faction is the Carlists. The Carlists were represented by the Cross of Burgundy, which was a white background and a red saltire, rather jagged, representing wood. Then we have the Catalans, who are horizontal red and yellow stripes. The next faction is Nationalist. However, I couldn't create a usable faction icon. I thought of using the Falanges symbol, but it's quite an intricate symbol, the yoke and the arrows, and it just looked awful. So I had to leave it blank. Then we have the Anarchists, red and black triangle. Then another blank for the Nationalists, a spare. Then there's the Basques. The Basques have something a bit like the Union Jack, with a saltire, which is green, and a cross, which is white on a red background. We can't do that on the ZX Spectrum, so I've had to compromise and had a green saltire on a red background. Another blank. This flag is meant to represent the flag of the Sovereign Council of Asturias and Leon, combining the yellow cross on the blue background of Asturias and the line of Leon. Because there are two halves of the flag, I can put the Asturian cross on the left and the line of Leon on the right. If you make changes to the colours in the game and then concede and restart the game, those changes will have gone. Something else is happening. If you look at the code when the game starts, it copies the type of unit and their movement points from a safe place to reset the game. We need to change the values within this safe place, and I've calculated the pokes, run a little program to do the poking, do a save, and now our unit changes are complete.
I'm back, you bastards! Think you'd have a war in Spain without me? Now, money's a bit tight, so I've not got my chosen men, but I've got a band of chosen monkeys. One of them's even got wings. I say, old chap, that's a bit much, isn't it? Less of your blather. I'm here for two things. To kill Frenchies, not Frenchies, old bean, Francoists. They support this chap called Franco. Right. I'm here for two things. To shoot Francoists and to find La Passionata. Hey up.
We've changed the factions around. Now on to the next Snorkerfication. I want to change the map. The current map is excellent, I do rather like it, but there are some things I'd quite like to add. So I did an artist impression in GIMP, and you can see I wanted to add more mountains, especially in the Basque Country, in Aragon, in Castile, and some more rivers. But I don't know how I'm going to go ahead with this, because I don't know how the graphics work. The game starts at address 24500. Looking at that address, we see the number 255 repeated 8 times, and then an odd value. This suggests this could be a graphic. If I change that to alternating 255s and zeros, like I did earlier with the unit flags, we see, yes indeed, this is the top left of the C. And it's every single C square is like this. By changing subsequent series of bytes, ignoring the odd byte, to different values, we see it goes top left, top right, bottom right. I then wrote a small program to go through these graphics and show them all in order and the address they are in. Afterwards I let it run, and then I discovered what looked like the font. Obviously not quite the font, but I've actually found the address of the font, and that was where it was. We know how the graphics work, we know where they are, but how does the map work? If you start at the main menu and activate debug mode, you find yourself waiting for input at address 44724. After pressing start game, you go to address 44749, which is a call to address 45860. Address 45860 immediately calls address 44863. Address 44863 does a series of elders, load immediate repeat, copying memory from one place to another. Looking at the first one, we are copying from 63107 to 35024 for a length of 1196. Looking at 35024, we have 15 zeros followed by a 1, then 195, then 357s. And the same applies at 63107. What could these be? Looking at my map with a handy row and column numbers plonked on in GIMP, we can see that the map starts at top left with a C, and then there are then 15 C squares before we reach the coast of France. After the coast of France, we then get the diagonally striped neutral area. If we look at 35024 and change the first 4 zeros to 1, 2, 3, 4, we get to see different graphics appear. We now know that this is the map. We want to change Huesca to make it mountainous. That is the graphic for Jaca in the mountains. At the moment, Huesca is a black circle on a white background. We want to make it like Jaca, so we need to find what graphic Jaca uses and then replace the graphic on the map with that of Jaca. A nationalist city in a white province with mountains. And that's done it. However, just because it looks mountainous doesn't mean it is mountainous. The movement points of the Civil Guard set out as 3. We move into Huesca, which is mountainous, but we have 2 movement points left. We should have 1 left. So it's not mountainous yet. There is another map which is of terrain. If you go back to looking at 44863, there's another elder, but this time to address 38192. If we look at 38192, this is some kind of movement map. A lot of 32s in there, then occasionally some 128 and some 1s. Through experimentation, I've worked out that 1 means it's mountainous. And now, Huesca is mountainous. We can utilise the same techniques to add mountains to the terrain map, but what about the graphics? The Basque Country isn't currently mountainous, and they use some very specialised graphics. For that, we need to edit them. In order to edit the graphics, I needed a way of showing them one at a time, so I knocked together this little program with as many space-saving tips as I could cram in, and you run it, and a little question mark appears, and you enter the number of the graphic, and it'll poke the graphics onto the screen with the correct attribute byte, and then tell you what the bytes are. You can then write a little routine on the basic command line, not to the program itself, there's not enough room, to poke the new values in. In this way I was able to add little mountains to the Basque Country, because it's all unique graphics. Nice and simple. Mountains done, now we look at rivers. There are already rivers in the game, and some of the places you want to put rivers have matching graphics elsewhere. For example, we want to put a river through Estremadura. There is a river in Aragon, the Ebro, which is a bright white province, and we've got both sides of that. That's nice and easy. There are some squares, such as Madrid, which are unique, and we can just edit those. It gets more difficult, though, when we come to squares that are already in use. For example, Talavera to the west of Madrid uses the same graphic as Brunete, the square northwest of Madrid. Toledo, southwest of Madrid, uses the same graphic as Alcalá and Ciudad Real and Reus and Lerida in Catalonia. So you can't just edit that. Fortunately, there are some spare graphics. If you go back to the graphic display, the last graphic used by the game is 243. After this, we've got a gap. However, just to be aware, we don't have a gap all the way up to 255. 255 itself is entirely empty. However, that's used for the borders of the map. We can't use that. 254 is used to display a graphic on the main screen. 252 and 253 are used to display the factions if they'll have hidden movement. But there are some spare graphics we can modify. This mostly worked fine, except when Portugal became nationalist. When Portugal becomes nationalist, the neutral state is changed to not neutral, and the game updates not only the map, but also some of the graphics themselves. What I needed to do was add some additional code to copy graphics back and forth. There wasn't a lot of space though, so I stored the graphics in memory, and the code to do the copying was placed inside the C at address 24500. Looking at the code here, we see we do some stuff, and then we jump over the attribute byte, which is set to 9, which is blue ink, blue paper. Doing this, it all just about works, but is of course very shonky. Doing it this way leaves us with 2 spare graphics, which we use to create 2 new cities, which are the French cities of Toulouse and Perpignan. At this stage, the rivers are now successfully on the map, but have no effect in-game. This is still to be fixed. I had theorised that rivers were part of the terrain map, with each direction being a bit setting. This couldn't work though, because 32 meant impassable, 1 meant there's a mountain there, 128 meant there was a land unit there, 64 meant there was an air unit there. That leaves 4 bytes spare. That's not enough. So perhaps there's another terrain map only for rivers. Looking at the map, I saw several areas where there were 6 identical river-like squares in a row. For example, the north bank of the Ebro in Aragon has rivers on the southwest and southeast sides of the squares, 6 in a row. I wrote a very simple basic program to look for 6 in a row bytes, hoping to find this mythical river map. Found some things that could have been. However, it is not done this way. So if you can't do things the quick and easy way, you do things the hard way by stepping through the code on movement. After a while, I noticed I was in this section here at 51996. 51996 saves the HL, DE and BC registers, then loads 1 into register C. Looking at the calls, the second call, 5130, refers to the terrain map 38192. The first call, 52117, again saves registers, and this time starts doing some stuff looking at address 42376 and a length of 200. If we look at that address, we see code that doesn't look like code, but in fact is a series of coordinates. 112, 213, 314. These are squares with a river in them. It is 200 long. Going back to 52117, what we see is a bit of clever code which essentially goes, does this square have a river in it? Checking the entire river table, which is 200 bytes long. If so, find out what half of the table we're in and look at the other half for a length of 100, looking for a matching square. Because if you need to be crossing a river for it to take effect. So therefore 42376 contains the list of rivers. I wrote a little basic program to list out the rivers in order. I then edited the code to add a bit more space and added in new spaces for rivers. However, I didn't have infinite space, so I could only add 1 new river. Also, I had to be careful, and I kept tripping over this when doing the coordinates. 26 is the right-handmost square on each line. It is not counted from 0 on the left, but down from 26 on the right, following the eastern coast of Spain. The other thing I wanted to add, but couldn't because of the design of the code, I wanted to add rivers to the east and west of Madrid, curling round with Toledo and a fork. That can't be possible because a square must be on one side of a river or the other, can't be on both. But adding this in, once I found this, which took a couple of months, it wasn't too difficult. While capturing footage for the Snorkerfied version, I came across this bug, and I'd seen it a few times before, but this time I was capturing footage, therefore was able to track down what it was doing and why. We are going to attack with the Soviet tanks and some militia against the nationalists. The nationalists have the Condor Legion in the same square in Avila, and the air unit is going to defend. We get an exchange result. The nationalists choose to sacrifice their militia, the Republic does the same, and then the Soviet armour advances, forcing the Condor Legion to relocate. Perfectly reasonable. In the next turn, if we select the Soviet tanks for movement, we notice they have no movement points. When we move them, we can move them over enemy pieces, but they also leave an enemy flag behind them, which is really rather strange. When we come to the combat phase, we can select the Soviet tanks and the anarchist militia and attack a unit across the river, even though the Soviet tanks are not adjacent. The Condor Legion surge up in defence, but this time they're faced with the armoured fist of the Soviet Union in the air!
Gotovish Ispansky Omelette de Razbizyates.
Having a Strength 5 air unit with a range of 6 is enormously helpful, which helps the Republic win the Civil War. Even if the unit is eliminated, which it is soon after, when it comes back via Soviet reinforcements, it's still an all-powerful air unit, which the Republic used to bomb the hell out of the fascists. However, this is obviously not quite right. What's the problem? The unit type hasn't changed, it's still a 586, but it's an air unit. How does that work? The game knows if a unit is an air unit based on the movement point byte, which is more than just movement points. The maximum number of movement points a unit can have is 7. That's only 3 bits. What are the rest of the bits? Well, the 4th bit, which is 8, governs if it's an air unit or not. And you can double check this by looking at the Spanish Air Force. If it's set, it's an air unit. If it's not, it's not. So what happens? This particular bug only happens when an attacking unit loses a piece and there is a defending air unit. So that's an exchange, an attacker loses 1 or an attacker eliminated. As part of the processing of moving a unit forward, it updates and resets the movement points with an OR statement. Normally it's an OR 17, but for this it's OR 25, which turns on the air unit flag. If you change that to OR 17, the problem goes away. The last Snorkerfication I did was to add a winning screen. I was looking for the victory points in memory and I couldn't find them. And if you can't find something, best thing to do is go to where they should be and try to follow the code. This is the exact point in the game where if the difference between the two sides is 20 or greater, you end the game. So here you jump into the debugger, see where you are, you're waiting to press a key, stick a breakpoint on the return and follow it through. And eventually you'll see something here where it pops the AF registers and then there's a CP20 which compares with 20. If you look at the registers, you'll see that the accumulator contains 2, which is the difference, and the BC registers contain 0 and 2, which are the victory points for the Nationalists and the Republicans. I replaced the CP20 and the return on carry with a jump to a new address. It's a very low address because this is where we need to do some extra processing. In the new area, the first thing we need to do is to compare the accumulator with 20. If it's less than 20, then we've not finished the game and we just return. If the difference is 20 or more, one side has won the game. We load the B register into the accumulator, subtract the C register from that and jump on carry. I had various options here, but I wanted to be nice and lazy. All I want is 3 bands of colour. And I'm going to do this not by clearing the screen, but by directly manipulating the attribute bytes. If you set the attribute byte to the same ink and paper colour, it's a solid block. I'm going to do this with 3 load immediate repeats. I don't have the memory spare to have blocks of colour just spare hanging around. So what I'm going to do is load the first byte with the correct value and then copy that repeatedly to the next byte. It's a bit weird, but it works. And here we see the code to do this for the nationalist side with the red, yellow, red. The Republican side is similar, just the lengths and the colours are different. And the end result, with a Republican victory, you get a Republican flag.
Alles Barbers, no son esclaus!
Viva!
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 Igualdad!